Hey everybody. I was doing some chant coding recently with the Saint Meinrad chant font, and I kind of got to wondering a bit about its history and whether it had been used with computers of the past. If you haven't heard of the Saint Meinrad chant font, it's basically a set of TrueType fonts that allow you to type chant into any word processor. It's quite interesting. Here's a bit of a intro what that actually kind of looks like to do. Basically you're typing lowercase or uppercase letters, some special characters, etc., and out spits chant instead of the letters that you're actually typing. So I looked at the website just to see what the history was, and sure enough it's developed around 1992, about not quite 30 years ago. So I got to thinking, well, maybe I could get a system up and running from about that era. Not exactly, I'm not going to be too pedantic about it, but I thought if I could get a system up and running around that era, that I could actually try it out and see what it would have been like in those days to have used this font. I'm not sure how you would have got a copy of it then, obviously not the internet, since it predates the World Wide Web. Anyhow, I thought maybe we could get that going and see what that looks like. So to do that, I'm going to use this mini vMac, and this particular build of mini vMac is emulating a Macintosh Plus, which is about period correct for 1992. There were other systems at the time, but this one wouldn't have been uncommon. I'm not going to talk about getting mini vMac or the ROM file for legal reasons. You're just going to have to go grab one of those yourself. But once you get one of those, you can boot up the system. The first thing you're going to need after you get that is some software. Now, System 7 had come out, I think, in 1991. So I think at the time, in 1992, System 6 and System 7 would have been common. So I'm going to use System 6. It's just a little bit simpler, maybe a little bit easier in some ways, probably a little bit more difficult than others. So here's a bootable disk image of System Software 6.0.8. So we'll grab both of those. And those will download. And then we can extract them. Now the built-in archive utility, I'm using Mojave here, 10.14. I'm always behind, it seems, but anyway, it doesn't support this era of StuffIt archives, so I actually have the StuffIt Expander and can just use that to extract these two. Legacy image should be converted. Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So that gives us the system startup disk that we need to get the OS installed. Now the next thing we're going to need is a disk. Of course, we could use a blank disk that they provide, or we could just create one. I'm going to use the dd command to do that. I'm going to create about an 80 meg disk, which it's probably about 4 times the size of a disk you would have seen in that era. We're not going to use anywhere near that. This is not a Macintosh disk, not yet, it's not. Let's initialize. Give it the super creative name of Macintosh HD. And we should have, yeah, a whole whack of disk space free. Let's run the installer and get System 6.0.8 on it. I'm going to customize this. I'm going to use just the LaserWriter. We don't need all these other printers. And the software for Macintosh Plus. I think this is being sped up about 8 times of the regular speed, so this would not have been this fast in the day. All right, we'll mount the System Editions disk and then mount the startup disk. Right, so that gives us a Macintosh HD with a system folder, so we can actually reboot now. And we will drag and drop that disk, and that boots us off that. It's kind of funny, it's got a floppy icon but yet it's an 80 meg floppy. So there you go. Right. So then we need some way to get files in and out. You can drag and drop disk images, both HFS native and DMG, right onto this thing, which is pretty neat. But to do individual files, you need a couple of utilities. So we will go grab those. The first utility is import and ExportFl. So we'll grab ExportFl and we'll grab ImportFl as well. Right, and we'll expand those. Now both of these are basically disk images, which allows us to drag and drop mount them. So we'll drag and drop mount ExportFl. You don't need all this other stuff. We'll just copy the export itself, and we can unmount that disk. And do the same thing for ImportFl. Go ahead and unmount that disk. The next thing we'd need is a word processor of some kind. I did a little checking around. MacWrite II seemed like a pretty reasonable choice. I wasn't a Macintosh user in this era. I probably started closer to System 7.5, 7.6, maybe in the mid-90s. So I had to kind of just go with what I read people were using. I think the first one here should be fine, so we'll grab that. And let's see, that is a StuffIt file. We can expand that. And it's given us a disk image. Great. So we can just mount that directly. Okay, so we've got copy contents to system folder. So let's go ahead and do that. Need to get the system folder in a place that we can see it to copy those things. So we'll dump those into system folder, and then we'll take MacWrite II and we'll just throw it right onto the hard drive. And then we can unmount that disk. Let's just make sure that the word processor part works okay. Wants me to register. I think it was the Salvage and Really Wild Stuff company, if I remember right. Okay, so great. Let's go Lazy Dog. Lazy Dog. Yeah, so not many fonts, not a lot of options, although, you know, back in 89, this would have been pretty darn impressive. So, cool. So that works. What's next? Right, so a lot of the things that we plan to import in future are going to require StuffIt Expander. So let's go grab that. Now they've actually packaged a special version of this to avoid the chicken and egg problem of how do you get a archive onto a system that doesn't have an archiver yet. So this is actually a disk image that we can mount, just like everything else so far. Cool, so that's the installer. We'll run that. Now you'll notice every time I launch any program, Finder disappears. I'm not running multi-Finder. It's not really necessary, honestly, for the little demo that I'm doing here, but super. Alright, so now we've got ourselves a StuffIt Expander somewhere. Now, it's a funny System 6/7 thing where you've got stuff hiding all the time with these long names and tight icon spacing. So anyway, yeah, System 6 has no default support for TrueType fonts, so we need to actually go and grab the TrueType extension and the font DA mover. So these are a pair of things that'll let you use TrueType fonts in System 6. Now, not just any TrueType fonts. We'll get to that in a sec. All right, so we've got both of those things. We can now use the ImportFl utility to take them. So we'll go ahead and save that. And we'll do the same thing for the TrueType one. Save that too. Okay. Now, these are, I guess, bin hex files. Let's see, font, DA mover. No, these are actually Mac binaries, bin. So to get those out, we need to open them up with StuffIt Expander. Now this is where you encounter the first trick. You'll notice there's no files in this list. Well, these files here have the wrong creator. And so StuffIt is not going to want to touch them. But there is a trick. If we put them in a folder, we can tell StuffIt to uncompress the entire folder. And when it does that, it's going to blow both of them up. And we'll be able to open them. Now, you got to hold down Command when you're going File, Expand. And then that gets you this extra button down there. So you can say select uncompress folder. And that will uncompress both of those things. And when we look at the folder now, we can see we've got two applications. These are self-extracting applications. And yeah, sure, we'll just stuff them there for now. And the TrueType one as well. So in this mess now we've got, again, it's kind of hard to see, I'll just clean up. So we've got the TrueType font extension and the font DA mover application. So we'll stuff the TrueType extension into the system folder, and we'll stuff the font DA mover into Macintosh HD. And then we can nuke all this stuff out of the uncompressed folder. We need to restart so that the extension will load. And now we'll be able to use TrueType fonts. So let's get some TrueType fonts. If you look at the Saint Meinrad website, you'll see it's got these fonts for Macintosh. Even though it says macOS 9, it's got these .ttf files. These are no good. You need fonts that were designed for classic Mac. That means fonts that have the font stuff in the resource fork, not in the data fork like these ones. These files don't probably even have resource forks. Fortunately, the old download is still up here, just under the download section. And if we scroll down near to the end of this one, you'll see it says chant font for macOS 9. And if we grab that file, that's a .sit file. And you might think, well, we could just import it. Just dump it in there. And it's got the wrong file type, so if we try to expand it, that's not gonna work. But we can stuff it into the uncompressed folder, and StuffIt should do its thing. So this looks promising, but spoiler alert, it doesn't work. The reason is the outer file is actually a bin hex, so no problem. The StuffIt Expander can deal with that. But the inner file is actually a version 5 StuffIt, and there's no way that this version 4 StuffIt Expander is going to be able to deal with that. So we've got to convert that. So while this is going on, I already know this is going to fail. What we'll do is we'll expand this package on the host system here. And if we look at that, we get these two font suitcases, which is perfect. These are fonts. They're not .ttf files with data in the data fork. They are actually real Macintosh fonts with data in the resource fork. And we can actually convert those into a format that can be accepted here. Now the emulation has stopped because I've flipped away, so I'll just flip back and let this thing finish just to show you how it didn't work. Keep in mind this would be 8 times slower in real life. So this would be a serious chew for this machine to get through. Right, let's see what that did. Alright, so we got a file called Saint Meinrad font package.sit. And you would think with a name like that, surely it would be expandable using this, but no, it's not. It doesn't work. So we'll just go in here and we'll just delete these. Didn't work. And on the host, I'm going to download another program. This is called HFS Disk Maker. This is a very useful thing that I found. And what this does is it can create HFS disk images from any file or folder on the hard disk. Very slick stuff. Thank you, Charles S. Of charlessoft.com, whoever you are. Very neat utility. So we'll download that, blow this thing up. So you can basically just drag any folder into this HFS Disk Maker app, and out will come a DMG. And yep, sure enough, we got ourselves a DMG, and that's going to be mountable in Mini vMac. And when we do that, all of that resource for goodness is going to work. These things are, I mean, you wouldn't be able to open them like this, but they are Macintosh suitcases. They're fonts. So those can be loaded with this font DA mover. So if we go ahead and open that, oh, that's right, we're not going to be able to do that from there. We've got to copy these over first. So we'll just throw these on the hard drive, and we can dismount that disk. Alright, so there we go. There's two fonts, Saint Meinrad A and B. So we'll go ahead and copy that into the system. And then ditto for Saint Meinrad B. Right. So theoretically now, we can get rid of these. We don't need them anymore. Theoretically now, MacWrite should be able to use these fonts. So you'll see in the font list, we got a couple new entries. They don't look very good. I guess that's what you'd get if you literally typed Saint Meinrad using the Saint Meinrad font. But anyway, let's see how they look. So I'm going to cheat. It turns out it's pretty hard to do this on the fly. So I'm just going to type something that I've typed in before, and we'll see how we go. I'm going to crank the size up to about 60 points. I usually use about 48, but just to view it a little bit better on the screen, 60 seems to be a good place. So let's go. We'll start by typing a clef and see if we get anything. Right, so that's very good. That's a very good result. And I'm going to go ahead and type some more of this stuff. Got to try to remember where the divide key is on here. So we'll use keycaps, and it's going to be an option /. Okay, now that symbol, I'm not even sure how to type on that keyboard, so I'm going to have to look at my host configuration and see where that's going to be at. Not even sure the name of that symbol, honestly. That's a Shift Option period. Yep, would never have guessed that. Shift Option period. All right. Okay, let's see how he did. In case you haven't figured out what I'm actually typing here yet, let me help you out a bit. That's a little bit off. That's a bit better. Hey, not too bad. Couple of things need fixing. That looks like a rhombus or something right now. Anyway, that's not right. It should be a the top of a dequescent, I think you call that. It's using the Saint Meinrad B font. So there we go. That's a little bit more sensible. And let's see. That seems to be an errant note there, so we'll just rip that out. I think that turned out pretty well. Let's see how that compares to the real deal. Oops. Oops. Yeah. Yep, that looks very good. I couldn't get the drop cap in, and there was one other. This dot is kind of overlapping, and I couldn't get that manually kerned out, but otherwise that's pretty darn good, I would say. Yep, I think I'd buy that. All right, so this is good. We could save it, and we're going to call this 2S Petrus. It'd be kind of neat if we could print this, and I think we actually can. So I'm going to print. Oh, yeah, got to use the chooser. So go to the chooser, select the laser writer. Well, it's an AppleTalk network, which I don't have, but that's fine. I can go on anyway. And we'll print to a PostScript file. And we'll call it Alleluia.ps. And rather amazingly, we get this Alleluia.ps file out of it, which is pretty interesting. It's pretty big. 500K, especially in those days, would have been pretty massive. You know, these are the days of 3.5-inch floppies, 800K floppies. So to take up a half a floppy with just one printer file, that would have been pretty big. Right, okay, so let's export it and to the system and see if we can actually take a look at it. So we'll export Alleluia.ps, and yep. And there it is. Double click it, and sure enough, opens right up. and we get this result, which, I mean, honestly, this is 1992, folks. This is amazing to me anyway. I think to be able to produce something like this, you know, with the technology of that era, it's very neat. So there you have it. System 6, Saint Meinrad chant fonts, PostScript being exported and viewed on a modern system here in 2021. If you made it this far, thanks for tuning in, and catch you next time.